welcome to the World Today. I'm Joke Rogers. In the next half hour, we'll take you through what's been happening around the world. The UK and Germany co-chaired the 27th Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting at NATO's headquarters in Brussels today. 50 nations took part in the meeting, after which it was announced that a further 21 billion euros in military aid would be allocated to Ukraine. The UK and Germany announced their support in more detail prior to the meeting. Britain announced a further £450 million of military support to Kyiv as part of a wider package which includes additional funding from Norway aimed at piling pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin. The aid will be provided via the UK-led International Fund for Ukraine, a mechanism that uses financial contributions to rapidly procure military equipment. It includes £160 million to provide repairs and maintenance to vehicles and equipment the UK has already provided to Kyiv. Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, on the other hand, says Ukraine can count on Germany for additional help, including more than 11 billion euros of 9.5 billion pounds aid until 2029. In the meantime, U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff has traveled to Russia today to meet with President Vladimir Putin. It will be the third meeting with the Russian leader since February. The Kremlin confirmed that discussions will include the war in Ukraine. In Ukraine, the wait is on to see whether Russia will be put under more American pressure to agree to a ceasefire, as they're starting to run out of patience with their European allies. President Volodymyr Zelensky had announced earlier that Ukraine is preparing new sanctions targeting who he called Russia's war propagandists and shadow fleet. He criticized Russia for ignoring diplomacy and exploiting international relations for its own benefit. This all comes as Russian strikes on Ukraine continue, with the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, saying Russia is escalating the war, and Russia accusing Ukraine of attacking its energy infrastructure 5 times in the last 24 hours. And aside discussing military support for Ukraine, the coalition of the willing defense ministers also talked about the creation of a peace force for Kyiv. The EU's High Representative, Kaja Kallas, says discussions are ongoing on various mission types, such as monitoring, deterrence or peacekeeping. UK Defence Secretary David Healy stated that there were well-developed plans and objectives in Ukraine. He outlined 4 main objectives: securing air and sea safety, supporting peace on land, and strengthening Ukraine's defence capabilities. Let's hear more on this from the NATO HQ in Brussels.
But the main focus must be that Ukraine's armed forces are the top one priority now to strengthen up. That's their key security guarantee, that we have to even more strengthen their army and defense industry after the ceasefire. And the second pillar is that this Western forces or Western operation will support the Ukraine's army.
It is also in the interest of the United States that there is stability and peace in Europe, because it is what is happening in Ukraine and how this war ends also has an impact on other security theaters like Asia Pacific, for example. So it's also in the interest of the United States. Well, of course, it's up to the member states to provide concrete numbers, and we have the discussions, and you know these discussions as well. Some member states are willing to participate, some are not, and these discussions are still ongoing. But I'm coming back to the point where, the question is, first, if there is peace, then what kind of troops or what kind of reassurance we really need.
We advance the momentum of that planning here today, planning to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position to protect its sovereignty and to deter any further Russian aggression. And while today's discussions will be private, our planning is real and substantial. Our plans are well developed, and we have clear objectives for Ukraine. First, to secure safe skies. Second, to secure safe seas. Third, to support a peace on the land. And fourth, to support the Ukrainian armed forces to become their own strongest possible deterrent.
Let's expand this discussion. Joining us now is Stephen Hayes, International Affairs Analyst. Pleasure having you again with us today.
Thank you. It's good to see you again.
Right. So the Brussels summit has seen the UK and other Ukraine allies pledge 21 billion euros in new military support for Kyiv. This is what the US President Donald Trump wanted, isn't it?
Well, certainly he wants Europe to put in more support for Ukraine as well as for their own military. 21 billion sounds like a large amount. It's probably a lot more is still needed to protect and buttress Ukraine. But yes, I mean, it's a step forward. It is what Trump says that he has wanted. But a lot of that aid is going to depend on buying the military equipment that they need is going to be U.S. military equipment. So again, that's another question coming up.
And why does it seem like the UE is now taking the lead from America in providing military aid to Ukraine despite U.S. efforts to broker a ceasefire? Perhaps they don't trust the unpredictability of the team led by Donald Trump.
Well, it seems that way because that's the reality. It is that way. I think that they've lost confidence in the U.S. Reliability to work with Europe, particularly Western Europe. And I think that's a very troubling trend. And they've got now forced to look at how do we protect ourselves, since the issue of Ukraine really is a European issue. If Ukraine goes, most of the Europeans feel that puts the rest of Europe much more in peril. So it is a reality that they need to step forward and put in more on their own. And they are right now the major support, because Trump has made it very clear, President Trump has made it very clear that he is not going to support Ukraine in the way the U.S. has in the past.
And Mr. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is to meet President Vladimir Putin. This has been confirmed by the Kremlin after much speculations. I believe this is the third meeting since February. Could this bring about a major breakthrough?
Well, it could, and it could not, of course, too. We just don't know what the deals are going to be. Witkoff is there not simply for Ukraine. He's also there to talk about U.S.-Russia relations. So how that goes will also, I think, affect Ukraine. For instance, if Russia and the U.S. become closer, that's going to put far more pressure on Zelensky and Ukraine to come to some agreement, but it's also going to make an agreement difficult from the Ukraine side, because it will look like any deal would favor Russia. So Witkoff, who is a seasoned diplomat, is in a very difficult position. He's got to balance the needs of Trump against the needs of Ukraine, and also work on the pressures of Russia. And then has to have President Trump agree to where things are headed. So I think he's in a very difficult position.
Right, and last month, Ukraine said it was ready to accept a U.S. proposal for an initial 30-day ceasefire, but Russia has yet to make a decision on this. Is Vladimir Putin serious about a ceasefire and peace in Ukraine?
Well, right now, I don't think he's quite serious, because I think he thinks he's winning, and he would need to see that a ceasefire helps him more than it is Ukraine. I think it does help Ukraine a bit more at this stage if it could come to a ceasefire, because it gives them a chance to restock. And as the European representative said in the film right before this interview, after the ceasefire is declared, aid will be going in. So it's not necessarily in Putin's interest to support a ceasefire. It's only in his interest right now, and to the extent that he wants a stronger U.S.-Russia relationship. But if he thinks that Trump is already ready to agree with him. There's not a strong incentive to do so. So it matters. What will matter is what as they agree and talk. What matters is whether they can come to an agreement that is important enough for Putin between U.S. and Russia to support a ceasefire with Ukraine.
Even with these meetings going on, in Europe, the war, and of course the envoy that's in Russia, the war continues. Earlier this week, Ukrainian president said Chinese citizens are fighting for Russia in the war after 2 Chinese fighters were captured. This marks Kyiv's first official allegation that China was supplying Russia with manpower. Does this change the dynamics of the war?
Well, it changes it tremendously. If China is, in fact, much more directly involved in that, then that will put pressure on the U.S.-China relationship, which is already bad in the Pacific as well. And it'll also put significant numbers on the Russia side. Russia supposedly has lost hundreds of thousands of troops in this war, and the fact that they would have almost endless support from North Korea and China would put enormous pressure, and does, I think, put enormous pressure on Ukraine. So again, that's going to have to be part of the formula, and the Witkoff is surely going to discuss that today as well. I would assume that China will probably deny that, but they haven't made any official statement to my knowledge yet, which is also telling. But if they are involved, it's going to change the dynamics very, very significantly.
All right, international affairs analyst Stephen Hayes, thank you again for your time.
Thank you. An honor as usual.
Well, the U.S. and Russia have announced another prisoner swap between both countries, the second such exchange since President Donald Trump returned to the White House, vowing to improve relations with the Kremlin and end the war in Ukraine. According to the deal negotiated by the country's intelligence agencies, Russia released Ksenia Karelina, and a dual Russian-American citizen who had been serving out a 12-year sentence in a maximum security prison colony. A native of Russia's Ural Mountains who later moved to Los Angeles, the 33-year-old ballet dancer was detained while visiting her parents in Russia in February last year. President Trump, speaking on her release, says he appreciates the ballerina who was released at the request of a very good friend.
We'll look into it, but I think beyond that, we're really looking to get that war stopped. They're losing 2,500 and even more than that young people a week. They're Russian and they're Ukrainian. They're not American, but they're people, and we're seeing if we can get it stopped. And I think we're making progress. I appreciate the ballerina who was released. It was at the request of a very good friend of all of ours, actually. Dana White called me and he said it's the friend or the relationship of one of the fighters for UFC or one of the fighters. And Dana's an incredible guy, and we spoke to President Putin about it, and they made a deal. They released the young ballerina, and she is now out, and that was good. So we appreciate that. We hope that we're going to be able to make a deal relatively soon with Russia and Ukraine to stop the fighting. It's so senseless. It's such a horrible thing. It would have never happened if I were president, but it did happen, and we were given that card, and I think we're going to get it. I think we're going to get it stopped. Got to get going.
Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce is praising the president's team for securing the release of the U.S.-Russian citizen from Russian detention. She also thanked the United Arab Emirates for support in enabling the exchange. Ms. Bruce confirmed the prison exchange involving Russian national Arthur Petrov, emphasizing that efforts are ongoing to free other detained Americans.
To begin, we are pleased to share that American Ksenia Karelina is on her way back to the United States. Ksenia was detained in Russia for more than a year and will soon be reunited with her loved ones. We have not forgotten about all of those who Russia continues to unjustly detain, including American Stephen Hubbard. President Trump's team, at his request, engaged with Russia on Ksenia's case. Secretary Rubio, Special Envoy Witkoff, CIA Director Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Waltz, and Special Envoy Bowler mobilized their teams to bring her home. We thank the government of the UAE for their support at enabling the exchange. The Biden administration hadn't talked to Russia at all. I mean, President Trump is the first to engage with Russia for years. So when we think about the nature of either administration, but this is about leadership. It transcends partisanship. It's about how do you conduct your business to get things done? Do you just simply not talk to people and turn a blind eye and do nothing? Or do you engage when it comes to stopping the carnage, stopping wars, getting people released from being unjustly held, or just even getting Americans back home? You've got to engage with people to do this. And Secretary Rubio's made it very clear, is that when they've asked if he trusted Putin as an example, he talked about that it's in this dynamic you have to deal with what people do and what they don't do. That trust really isn't the issue. It's about expectations, what people are supposed to do, and whether they do them or not. And you can then talk. You must be able to talk with everyone if you want to get results. And I think that that's what we have in this administration. And we see it every day, including today and with her release. And we'll see it on Saturday. Got the best diplomats in the world, with certainly being led by Secretary Rubio. All of our leadership, particularly President Trump and Secretary Rubio in public, have made it clear what's at stake when it comes to the nature of this situation ending. It is a dynamic that will not be solved militarily. It is a meat grinder. There is nothing else can be discussed for the outcome until the shooting and the killing stops. Secretary Rubio made clear at NATO in his press conference that we would in fact know in a matter of weeks if Russia was serious. And so we'll take him at his word, certainly, as we do. And I think Russia certainly needs to take that seriously, and we'll play that out. But this is not going to go on for 6 months or a year or anything else. And the president has also made it clear we want diplomacy. But the fact is that we're watching and judging as this process continues.
Well, U.S. markets opened slightly down following the fluctuations in global stocks over Donald Trump's global tariffs. It comes as China raises import taxes on U.S. goods to 125% in response to 145% levy on some of its goods imported to America. Analysts say the tariff increases between China and the United States are now becoming almost meaningless. That's because the levies on each other's imports are so high that they already impede much of the trade flowing between the two. Chinese President Xi Jinping will be meeting with leaders of other nations as Beijing looks to forge new trade routes and shore up opposition to U.S. tariffs. Today, he's been meeting Spain's Prime Minister and calling on the EU to combine with China to jointly resist the unilateral bullying practices of the Trump administration, saying there are no winners in a tariff war. Next week, he will visit Vietnam, Cambodia and Malaysia, all countries currently marked for devastating tariffs from the U.S. after the 90-day pause on them is over. Well, the global trade chaos continues as President Trump backs down from his tariff threats, announcing that 90-day pause we just spoke about on all but tariffs against China. Deutsche Welle's Lars Holt joins me now from Berlin for more on this. Lars, great to see you today. From the EU perspective, what can you tell us about these latest developments?
Yeah, interesting developments here, and of course, back yesterday, the EU was actually just as surprised as everybody when Trump initially backed down from this threat. Of course, he didn't when it comes to China, but he did with the EU. And it's interesting how it all happened. Trump saying, of course, that over 75 countries called him offering deals. We don't actually know exactly who called him, but we do know that the European Union is definitely among those trading partners that have indeed indeed offered to negotiate with the Trump administration. Last thing we heard about Brussels here, that the bloc wanted to initially stick to countering only those initial tariffs on steel and aluminium. So they were clearly already trying to avoid an escalation in the trade war. They had, however, at the same time made it clear that they were looking at certain steps, including targeting U.S. tech giants, with the EU finally taxing Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Amazon and Apple at reasonable rates for their services rendered in Europe to European customers. And such a step would amount to a multi-billion-dollar hit against the U.S. economy.
And why is the EU unwilling to levy counter tariffs on more goods, as many had expected them to?
Exactly. We don't really even know why the EU tried to avoid counter tariffs on certain goods, but they were, or at least they were not talking about it yet. Again, that could, of course, be part of a strategy to negotiate here with the Trump administration. We do know, however, at the same time that they were hesitant to put counter tariffs on certain goods, including, for example, whiskey and wine from the U.S. Now, that obviously would be good news for those who appreciate a digestif, but it's also a sign of the kind of lobbying that the EU Trade Commission has seen over the past few days, because in this particular case, it was French winemakers, for example, who protested such tariffs because they were afraid to be then hit with counter tariffs again on, for example, their champagne. Similar situation over in agriculture. Tariffs on soybeans and almonds were pushed off after European farmers had stepped up. They too were afraid to be hit with more counter tariffs on their goods. Now, Germany's economic minister, Robert Habeck, was very critical indeed of these moves. And he said, and I think rightly so, if every country now or every special interest group tries to protect their particular products, we're actually not getting very far in terms of negotiating or fighting back.
Lars, looking forward now with the Trump administration trying to negotiate, what does the EU bring to the table?
There's a host of things, actually. They just discussed these possible counter tariffs, and I'm pretty sure those will be communicated as something the EU could do, that they actually could hurt the US if they need to, which from a Brussels perspective, that is certainly not what they want. But they will, of course, have to make it clear to the Trump team that they will take any steps necessary. One instrument the EU discussed is also export taxes, ironically. So pretty much that would be the EU levying tariffs on its own exports, making goods they are sending in the US more expensive. Now, that would be a good tool for sectors where the US doesn't actually want a fight. Trump has, for example, excluded pharmaceuticals from any tariffs. And why? Well, because the US needs to import pharmaceuticals. They're not producing enough and they need them to save lives. So the EU now, with its massive pharmaceutical sector, including many companies here in Germany, they could sell their product at a higher price, putting enormous pressure on Washington to react. Also, Brussels wants to look at improving trade with countries and economic zones other than the US. Now, they might join the Pacific Trade Agreement, which already, of course, also includes Canada, Britain, Japan. There's also the Mercosur Treaty in South America that is going to affect into effect later this summer. So there's definitely a lot of options, including that they're talking to China with deals possibly regarding the e-mobility and e-vehicle sector. So at the same time, of course, people here are wondering how this is playing out with these negotiations, because we know there is no way that Trump can have meaningful talks with 75 or more economies now in a short time. We know, of course, at the same time that all this, what we've seen over the last couple of days, was mostly for show. So it might also be that trade worldwide, with the exception maybe of China, might go back to the way it was, minus, of course, the trust that trade partners used to have in the US.
Right, Lars, a pleasure having you again on the program. Thank you for your time. And still to come on The World Today. The World Food Programme paints a grim picture of the war in Sudan as it's the world's largest humanitarian crisis in terms of displacement. Details soon. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has met with U.S. State Department Senior Advisor for Africa, Masad Boulos, in Paris, where he is currently on a short working visit. According to a statement shared by President Tinubu's Special Advisor on Information and Strategy, Bayo Ononuga, the United States has opened discussions with Nigeria, expanding economic cooperation across Africa as part of efforts to deepen trade, investment and development ties on the continent. The talks also centered on strategies to secure lasting peace in the troubled eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo, while also exploring fresh opportunities for economic collaboration between Africa and the United States. The meeting underscores Nigeria's growing role in shaping regional stability as both leaders exchanged ideas on fostering development and reinforcing partnerships that drive prosperity. The head of the U.S. military base in Greenland has been fired after she reportedly sent an email distancing herself from Vice President J.D. Vance's criticism of Denmark. The U.S. Military Space Operations Command said Colonel Susanna Myers had been removed from her role at Pituffik Space Base due to a loss of confidence in her ability to lead. Last month, J.D. Vance said Denmark had not done a good job for Greenlanders and had not spent enough on security while visiting the Danish territory. The alleged email released by a military news site told staff Vance's comments were not reflective of the base. New York Mayor Eric Adams says 6 people, including 3 children, had been killed after a helicopter carrying a family of tourists crashed into the Hudson River. He says the family of 5 were from Spain and the 6th person was the pilot, adding that all were on board at the time of the crash, which is under investigation. The victims have been identified as Augustin Escobar and his wife, Merce Cambrubi Montal, who were both executive at Siemens, and their children aged 4, 5 and 11. Officials said the helicopter lost control soon after turning at the George Washington Bridge to move along the New Jersey shoreline.
We are here on the scene at Pier 40 on the west side of Manhattan, where earlier today a passenger helicopter crashed into the Hudson River. Our response was swift and coordinated. We have the FDNY, the NYPD, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner here on the scene assisting with rescue efforts. New York City Office of Emergency Management was coordinating efforts on the ground with our public safety agencies. As our state and federal partners, including the FAA, the Port Authority, and the United States Coast Guard, the National Transportation Safety Board, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and our partner agencies in New Jersey.
Our hearts go out to the family of those who were on board and all 6 who were on board of the helicopter. It's almost reminiscence of the plane going down here on the Hudson River, but thank God we didn't lose any lives back then. It's still fresh and it's still new. The investigation is ongoing, and we have the entire family members. We're lifting them up in prayer. Here's what we know at this time. At approximately 3:17 this afternoon, we began receiving multiple calls for a helicopter that crashed in the water. These calls generated the response of many agencies. 3 adults and 3 children were on board a Bell 206 helicopter that had left from the downtown Skyport just about 3 p.m. The pilot and the family visited from Spain, what our preliminary information has at this time. Members of the FDNY and NYPD harbor units arrived at the scene, and divers from both agencies entered the water. At this time, all 6 victims have been removed from the water. And sadly, all 6 victims have been pronounced deceased. Again, we're praying for the families and our gratitude to the rescuers and the courage that was displayed and their dedication.
Approximately 3:15 this afternoon, numerous calls were received for a helicopter crash in the Hudson River. We have FDNY assets right up the road here, and we launched our boats immediately. This operation was a joint operation between the FDNY and the NYPD. Our rescue swimmers were in the water shortly after the call and recovered some of the victims.
Our NYPD divers entered the water along with rescue personnel from FDNY, Port Authority, and various New Jersey agencies. According to the manifest, aboard the helicopter were 6 people, 1 pilot, 2 adults, and 3 children. NYPD divers pulled 4 people from the crash site, and FDNY divers recovered an additional 2.
Let's get more on this. Joining us now is our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird. She joins us via telephone. Hello, Maria. Well, not such a great moment to be speaking to you. You know, a tragic incident that has occurred in the United States, in New York to be precise. What's the latest update from the authorities at this time?
Yeah, as you mentioned, condolences to the family that are definitely dealing with such tragic news. A whole family of 5, and obviously the pilot as well, who were tragically killed during this incident. It is unclear exactly how this happened. As I heard your report earlier that the helicopter was making a turn around 3:15 p.m. Going back south, circling the George Washington Bridge after it had circled around the Statue of Liberty just a few moments before that. And so it is still not clear as to how this happened. Those eyewitnesses have said they saw the propeller separating from the actual plane, the helicopter. And so they're not sure why that would have happened. Authorities and obviously those who are experts with flying those type of helicopters say those are some of the best in the business, that helicopter is one of the best you could fly. So they are not sure how this could have at all happened, especially when you're talking about just a very short ride tour that's done quite often in New York City for sightseers and for those tourists that are coming to visit.
Right, and investigations have been launched into this tragic accident. Earlier we heard some of the security agencies and of course the responders talking about the fact that, you know, it's not quite clear what led to the accident, and you just also said that yourself. So what should we expect in this kind of investigation?
Well, what you're going to expect right now is, one, to be able to have, there's typically a black box on every helicopter, every plane that provides some detail as to exactly what the pilot was saying moments before the crash happened. It was noted that it appeared as if there was like a nosedive happening with the helicopter. It seemed to spiral several times over. And so that's going to be something that they're going to look into. What was the pilot saying when he felt that the helicopter was going out of control and that he could no longer control the actual helicopter? What was actually happening mechanically with the helicopter from the time it took off until the time of the crash? Were there any red flags mechanically that were made aware to those who were ensuring the helicopter was safe and secure for it to go up on that day? And if there were no maintenance issues, what could have caused and broken if there was an electrical issue? So they're going to be looking into all of those ramifications. And obviously, they're going to be looking for the air traffic controllers to see if they received any notification that something was going wrong with the helicopter. So it's going to be quite an investigation, especially being as though you're talking about something that is an everyday tourist attraction. People every day go up in those helicopters to sightsee in New York City, and this is a very busy time of year for New York for tourists right here during the spring break season.
Right, and this crash, Maria, again raises questions of air safety in the state. You just said that, this is what goes on almost on a daily basis for tourists. And this family came in from Spain. I believe the mother, the adult female in that crash, was one of the events, celebrating her 40th birthday. So the family were in the United States as tourists. They wanted to have a good time ahead of maybe the grand finale of the party. What about the tourist agency in charge of these tours? What has been the track record, and what have we heard, as comments from the agency in charge?
Well, I will not say that it's never happened before, but in recent history, there's not been any type of crash of this nature for this very frequent helicopter crash or helicopter sightseeing, this tour. As you mentioned, yes, the mother was celebrating her 40th birthday. The young child was getting ready to celebrate their 8th birthday. So it was a celebratory time for the family. The father was on business, and they came to meet him in the United States, and specifically in New York, to be with him at the end of his trip and to have this celebration during which many are considering the spring break season right here before Easter. And so this is, I think, as you mentioned, will this put any type of additional safety measures? I'm sure it will. I'm sure this will require that there's further investigation done on how these sightseeing tours are conducted, what are the safety measures in place, and was this a lone incident that was unfortunate lone incident, or is there some kind of breach in the measures that are being taken around maintenance and security for these tours? And so all of that will be obviously investigated at this time. But from all that has been shown thus far, until further investigation is done, there's nothing that would indicate why this crash would have occurred.
Right, Maria, thanks again. Let's move on to other stories now. The U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce has condemned the situation in Gaza Strip, saying no human being deserves to remain in such an environment, while reaffirming support for Israel. She made the statement during a press conference in Washington, D.C., when she also blamed Iran for worsening the conditions in the region by funding death squads who took over the space and used you as a human shield. Ms. Bruce emphasized U.S. ongoing efforts to restore the truce, saying the work continues to get back to the Gaza ceasefire to make sure people can get aid and they can survive.
First of all, these actions, the threat of that kind of action, of course, is inconsistent with Iran's claims of a peaceful nuclear program, right? Also, expelling IAEA inspectors from Iran would be an escalation and a miscalculation on Iran's part. The United States remains deeply concerned that Iran is amassing a growing stockpile of highly enriched uranium for which there is no credible peaceful purpose. Iran is the only non-nuclear weapon state producing highly enriched uranium at this level. Also, beyond the threat to expel the international nuclear inspectors, but also threatening to transfer its stock of uranium to secret locations. And again, why would one need to do that if it was for peaceful energy work? Doesn't make much sense. So again, it is an escalation and a miscalculation on Iran's part if they were to do so. I can tell you that we are aware of course, the reports that you refer to regarding the French government's remarks, and we refer you to them for further comment. What I can also, though, say is that the United States stands firmly with the state of Israel in its pursuit to bring all the hostages back home and the defeat of Hamas. As a Special Envoy Witkoff has said, we need to explore new policy prescriptions that...
And still ahead on the program. Indian man set Guinness World Record for holding Hercules pillars for 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Stay with us. Welcome back. A senior World Food Programme official in Sudan is highlighting the huge toll the war is having on thousands of displaced people. Sean Hughes says by any metric, this is the world's largest humanitarian crisis in terms of displacement, and it's the only place in the world where famine is currently confirmed. Mr. Hughes, who was briefing reporters remotely from Nairobi on the situation in Sudan, says it's very serious.
This is the world's largest humanitarian crisis. In terms of displacement, 12.7 million people have been forcibly displaced from their homes, over 8 million people displaced internally, and 4 million across borders, arriving to countries that are already facing high levels of hunger and humanitarian needs. 4 out of every 5 people displaced are women and children. In terms of hunger, this is the only place in the world where famine is currently confirmed, and only the third famine to be classified this century. The scale of what is unfolding in Sudan threatens to dwarf much of what we've seen over previous decades. In Zamzam camp alone, which has been under siege for several months, there are over 400,000 people. In the country, nearly 25 million people, or half the population, face extreme hunger. Nearly 5 million children and mothers are acutely malnourished. This is a man-made crisis. Man-made because it is driven by conflict, not by drought or floods or earthquakes, and man-made because of the obstruction of access to humanitarian assistance by parties to the conflict. We need to be able to quickly move humanitarian assistance to where it is needed, including through front lines, across borders, within contested areas, and without lengthy bureaucratic processes. We need to establish offices and staff presence across all areas of the country, including the Darfur and Kordofan states, so that we can be close to the people we serve and monitor assistance and the situation as it unfolds.
UN Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Regional Director for Africa, Ahuna Eziokonwa, has made an official visit to Channels Television, meeting with the Chairman CEO of Channels Media Group, Dr. John Momo. They both discussed the role of African media in controlling the narrative of the continent's stories. She extolled the leading role played by Channels Television in becoming a source of credible and reliable information from the continent to the diaspora. In an interview later, she emphasized the need for African leaders to re-engineer their economies to benefit its people.
We can't say because an aid agency withdraws from a country, the people start to die. If that's the case, that's not a country, you know? This is a rich continent. Why can't we prioritize our people? Why can't we say that Africa's money needs to work for Africa's people? We're generating a lot of resources, but a lot of it is escaping. Illicit financial flows up to $90 billion a year lost. But we then go with a begging bowl for the same money to be returned in form of aid with ties and in form of loans that have very high interest rates, right? So there needs to be a conversation that African leaders need to have with themselves and with the private sector to say we need to re-engineer our economies so that Africa's money works for Africa's people, because this continent has money.
Workers in China have been told to hurry home. Classes are suspended and outdoor events cancelled as northern China braces for extreme winds this weekend. Millions of people have been urged to stay indoors, with some state media outlets warning that people weighing less than 50 kg may be easily blown away. Winds reaching 150 kilometers per hour are expected to sweep Beijing, Tianjin and other parts of Hebei region from Friday to Sunday as a cold vortex moves southeast from Mongolia. For the first time in a decade, Beijing has issued an orange alert for gales, the second highest in the 4-tier weather warning system. Strong winds sweeping from Mongolia are not uncommon, especially at this time of the year, but the impending winds are expected to be stronger than anything the area has seen in many years. Well, former U.S. First Lady Michelle Obama has spoken out against rumors that her marriage to Barack Obama might be in trouble. The former First Lady has not accompanied her husband to several high-profile events, including Donald Trump's inauguration and the funeral of former President Jimmy Carter, fueling speculation that they might be separating. Without explicitly mentioning these occasions, Mrs. Obama told the Work in Progress podcast hosted by actress Sophia Bush that she was now in a position to control her own calendar as a grown woman. She said that people were not able to believe that she was making a decision for herself, and instead had to assume that her husband, my husband and I are divorcing. Mrs. Obama shared that she felt some guilt for stepping back from certain duties. However, in the podcast, she said she chose to do what was best for her. In the heart of Atuhaya, central Thailand, elephants adorned in vibrant colorings have joined the water splashing festivities, signaling the arrival of the iconic Songkran festival. The ancient city reverberates with joy as locals and tourists gather to partake in this cherished tradition, setting the stage for Songkran from April 13 to 16. Officials and revelers convened to inaugurate the festivities at the Elephant Palace and Royal Kraal, where a group of elephants, each dressed in floral patterns reminiscent of the province's symbolic blooms, captivated the crowd. The essence of the Thai New Year celebration of Songkran lies in the symbolic act of cleansing and renewal, where people splash water on one another to wash away the past year's sins and misfortunes, heralding fresh beginnings. And finally, on the program, we end with some strength. Vispi Karadi, affectionately dubbed the Steel Man of India, has won a prestigious Guinness World Record for holding Hercules pillars for an impressive 2 minutes and 10.75 seconds. His extraordinary accomplishment involved lifting pillars weighing 166.7 kg and 168.9 kg. The renowned athlete boasts multiple black belts, holds 16 Guinness World Records, serves as a trainer for BSF commandos in unarmed combat, and is also recognized as a fitness expert, nutritionist, actor, and model. Mr. Karadi hails from Surat city in the western Indian state of Gujarat and takes pride in shattering the stereotype that Indians are genetically predisposed to physical weakness.
Currently, I'm into fitness and martial arts. I'm a nutritionist also. And what I've been known for is my 16 Guinness World Records as of now. So I'll be going 100%. I'll be going for some more Guinness World Records in future very soon. And I want to encourage the youth and give a message out loud that we Indians can do unthinkable if we just think about it. We need to just focus on our goals and just go for it. The Hercules Pillar stunt was done on 11th of November 2024, and that was predominantly done by the strongman athletes, those big athletes, large athletes. I respect them a lot. In fact, I also get inspired from them. But somehow I saw those records happening in front of me in Italy when I was there before the Guinness World Record show. And I thought I can do this stunt because I have a bit of confidence in my gripping strength. And I started practicing and I just attempted for the record. Hopefully and luckily I got the record. The training and the conditioning which happens in martial art, because of that I am able to do all these stunts. Because of my conditioning levels, because of the pain levels I have been surpassing, my brain is conditioned to take more pain, and that is how I can do this gripping strengths or nail bed stunts, or I can take on weight on my body, stuff like that.
That's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.